love the fall, I love spooky season, I love horror books, and I love, most importantly, lists. So today I'm going to be reacting to all of the listicles that Goodreads has put out relating to horror books. I've realized that not everyone is as aware or interested in the articles, the news, the interviews that Goodreads puts out, but I literally read them every single day. There's a new one every day of the week that's featured in the Discover section of the app. You can also check them out from a desktop browser by looking in the Browse section, and you can get around to the different articles. But this is a part of my daily routine, and it's definitely a part of my October routine to look at all of the horror ones they put out because they make it a big event. They compile them all into this one little center. They interview horror authors and ask for their recommendations. They put out lists of the most popular horror books of the year or of the past 5 years. They're just talking about all these different things, and I love looking at those lists, seeing which books I've already read, seeing which books I want to add to my TBR. It's just such a fun time for me, and so I thought it'd be fun today to bring you along with me. Let's look at the list together, react to them together, see if we get some new books out of our TBR, see how well I know the horror genre, see how well I think Goodreads knows the horror genre, and just explore all of the lists that they put out. And if you want to review any of these articles for yourself, I will have them all linked down below. You can just click the main link that I'll have linked and it'll take you to the hub for all of the articles. All right, so let's jump on in. Okay, so the first article that they have featured here is the 60 most popular horror books of the past 5 years. And automatically the first 2 books that are featured on this thumbnail image, I have read neither of those, but that's more of a me problem than a Goodreads problem, I think. So let's see what they've got. First, you get a lot of paragraphs that I usually don't read. I just skip right over to the books. So already I've read a couple. I wonder if these go in order. Maybe that's why I should read the paragraphs above. These titles are all classified as adult horror and were published from October 2017 to September 2022. I don't think they're in any particular order though. Or they might be, I don't know. But Mexican Gothic is up here. Definitely agree on super popular, have read that one. And this is nice because as I'm scrolling, you'll be able to see if I've read them or not, if they're on my TBR, what my ratings are for them. The Final Girl support group, I just refuse to read. It just got such terrible reviews and I already don't love Grady Hendrix stuff. And then Stephen King books, I also just don't read a ton of his stuff. I did watch this show though. It was pretty good until the ending. Took a weird turn. Bunny, Tender as the Flesh, The Only Good Indians. I have read quite a few of these. The Shadows being on here is interesting because it does have horror elements to it, but it does feel like more of a thriller. Imaginary Friend, I did read this one, but I did DNF it, so that's why I just immediately take it off of Goodreads if I DNF books. Plain Bad Heroines, I'm hoping to read this one very soon, like by the end of the year, but it's really long, so I put it off. Baby Teeth, I don't know if that one should be in this category. I don't think I've ever heard anyone call it a horror book. I haven't read it, of course, but that's interesting to see that in here. My Heart is a Chainsaw, that's another book I DNF'd. Yeah, I've read so many of these. The Burning Girls being in here, again, that's kind of weird. That's more primarily a thriller. The Silent Companions, I have not read, but all of a sudden I've been seeing a lot of people talk about this. Does anyone have thoughts on this book? Let me know if you've read this book and if I should pick it up because it was published 5 years ago and never heard anything about it, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this everywhere. So let me know if that one's worth picking up. Book of Accidents, really like that one. Amakatsu, I still haven't read anything of hers. I did read a short story of hers in that one collection I read. Dark Stars, I'm pretty sure she had a story in that about vampires. So I have read a short story, but never a full-length novel from her yet. Jess Laurie, that's another author too, where their books are like always Kindle Unlimited. So I do see their books pop up a lot, but I don't see people actually read them, and I definitely do want to read them. So let me go ahead and mark that as want to read. A Certain Hunger, that was another DNF for me. The Girl in Red, I didn't think that was a horror book, but maybe it is. Haven't read it. Summer Suns is kind of surprising to be in here as one of the most popular books of the last 5 years. I don't feel like I saw a ton of people reading that one. And this Dracul, I've like never even heard of that book. So that's also surprising. Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss, I can't believe that's in here. It has almost 20,000 ratings. That one, I think I still own it. I do still own it. I just haven't read it yet. Our Wives Under the Sea is really surprising to see in here because that just came out and I don't know if horror is its primary genre. It's one of those like genre defying books, I believe. Still haven't read it, but that is very surprising to see on the list. And then as we get closer to the bottom, there's less and less that I've read. Some I haven't even heard of, like this one I've never heard of, Wakenhurst by Michelle Paver. And The House Guest, that one's been on my radar for a while because I randomly saw it on one of these lists and I thought it looked interesting. There's only 3 books on this list that I've never heard of. Interesting. And then let me see how many I've read. And I'm not going to count books that I DNF'd, just to be fair. So I've read 17 of the 60 books, which is less than I expected, but still a good chunk. And then another handful that is on my TBR. And then finally, let's see if there's any new books I want to add to my TBR because I'm gonna get the FOMO from them being popular. Let's see, I know I don't want to read these books or If It Bleeds. And then there's a lot of books in here that I've just tried before and DNF'd. I do want to read Earthlings. I was surprised to see that's not already on my want to read on Goodreads, but I'll update that because I'm interested in that one. I'm kind of interested in The Hacienda as well, but not enough to fully mark it as want to read. It's one of those books that if I ever stumbled upon it at a secondhand store and could get it really cheap, I would definitely pick it up, but it's not at the top of my radar. And then I know I want to read an Omakatsu book, but I don't know if The Hunger is the one that I want to read of that, so I don't feel confident enough to add that to my TBR yet. Oh, and I guess I should mark Ghost Wall because I do own that book. And I think, yeah, that's pretty much it. I do know I want to read from Samantha Schweblin, but I don't know if Little Eyes is the one I want to read. That one I think is about surveillance, which seems interesting, but I know she also has out Fever Dream, which is really popular, and I just don't know if that's the one I would pick up. So not gonna add that to my list, but that was the most popular books of the past 5 years. Definitely some surprises in here, some books that are categorized a little bit strangely and are surprising to see on the horror list, and some books that I'm surprised are already making it into the most popular from the past 5 years, but overall not a terrible list. So next up we have the year's top horror authors recommend truly terrifying books. And I love these types of lists where they will interview popular authors who are coming out with books and they will ask them what are like 3 books that you would love to recommend to people. And it's just really cool to see the different themes in authors you're enjoying and then that connecting you to other books that they've also enjoyed, which could potentially be influencing their work. And I just feel like it's a cool place to get recommendations. So let's see who they interviewed this time around. First off, we have Sarah Gailey, who wrote Just Like Home, which was a 4-star read for me. And their recommendations, so it looks like we're gonna get 4 for each author. I've already read 2 of them. When No One Was Watching was a 2-star for me and House of Hollow was a 4-star. Both of those kind of surprised me to see Sarah Gailey recommending because Sarah Gailey writes really poetic stuff. I guess that kind of makes sense for House of Hollow, but House of Hollow is a YA book and I just don't really envision Sarah Gailey reading YA. And then the other 2, Dead Silence, I haven't read that one yet, but I do think I want to add that to my TBR. And then Number One Fan I've never heard of by Meg Ellison. I wonder if this is someone that Sarah Gailey knows personally. She created a beautiful world, now he wants it all. On her way to a speaking engagement, a novelist gets in a cab, accepts a drink from the driver, wakes up chained in the stranger's basement. That sounds like a book that would be uncomfy for me, so not gonna add that one to my TBR. Next up we have Gabino Iglesias, and I have not read The Devil Takes You Home, but I definitely do want to add that to my TBR. This is when it becomes overwhelming, is when I read these lists and I just keep adding so many books to my TBR and I have to go on big sprees to review all the books that I want to read in Goodreads and clean it out later. But it is also exciting because you find a lot of books that you want to add to your list. And since I haven't read from this author, I don't know their style, but if they're recommending A Head Full of Ghosts, which I recently read and was a 5-star and I loved it, then they've got great taste. Last Days by Brian Evanson is on my TBR already. Tinfoil Butterfly I have heard about, but I don't know a ton about it offhand, and if it's something I'm super interested in adding to my TBR. And then here's The Hunger by Omakatsu, coming up again. Maybe this is a sign that I should add this one to my TBR. Let me read the description for it. Evil is invisible and it is everywhere. Tamsin must be a witch. That's the only way to explain the series of misfortunes that have plagued the wagon train known as the Donner Party. This just doesn't sound incredibly interesting to me. And it's categorized a lot under historical fiction. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be adding that to my TBR now, but it is interesting to see that book keep coming up. Next we have Stephen Graham Jones, who is amazing. I haven't read Don't Fear the Reaper because I didn't finish My Heart is a Chainsaw because I wasn't really into that one, but Stephen Graham Jones recommendations. Come Closer by Sarah Grant has been on my TBR forever, definitely still is. And these are some darker recommendations coming from Stephen Graham Jones, which kind of surprises me because he does write more gritty books, but not as disturbing as Exquisite Corpse, which I just recently read a couple months ago. 4-star for me, but like, wow, that is a disturbing book. And The Girl Next Door I've also heard is really disturbing, and I'm actually afraid of that book. I'm afraid to pick it up. I don't want to pick it up So that is a really interesting combination of recommendations coming from Stephen Graham Jones. And then we have The Loop, which I have heard of, but I haven't read. It says it's Stranger Things meets World War Z, which are two things I'm not really interested in, which is why it's never really been on my radar. And that is something I can see Stephen Graham Jones liking and recommending, because that sounds kind of similar to his style. Then we've got Amakatsu coming up because The Fervor just came out this year, I suppose. Like I said, I haven't read a full novel from Amakatsu, but I did read, I'm pretty sure she wrote The Vampire's Assistant, or The Vampire's Familiar. I think that was the name of the short story that she wrote in Dark Stars. Oh, it was called The Familiar's Assistant. Oh, and look at that. Amakatsu is recommending the anthology that they have his story in. That is very funny. Yeah, I didn't fully get into that one. I didn't really love the stories I was reading in it, but I also don't have a good history with anthologies, so do not take my word for that. The Pallbearers Club, I did really enjoy that one recently. The Devil Takes You Home. Didn't I just click want to read? I'm pretty sure I just added that, but maybe it didn't catch up because I haven't refreshed the page. And also nice that these authors are supporting each other. And then The Grip of It by Jack Jemk is another one that I've seen a lot, but I don't know what it is, and I've never really thought about picking it up. It has a really low average rating of a 3.22, but it does say it's a literary horror, and sometimes people don't want that in horror and they end up not liking it. But it sounds really interesting. Psychological, haunted house, a family moving into it. I'll add that to my want to read. And then next up we have T. Kingfisher. I did read What Moves the Dead, half of it, and then I DNF'd it. Just wasn't really for me. And I have read The Hollow Places from T. Kingfisher as well, and again, just didn't really enjoy that one. So I don't think T. Kingfisher is the author for me. So these might be reverse recommendations, but T. Kingfisher did recommend The Fisherman by John Langan, which I did really enjoy. The others, I have heard of Annihilation. I'm not super interested in it. And then these other two books I haven't even heard of. This is a Stephen King I've never heard of, and then this book I've just absolutely never heard of it. It was published in 1907, very, very old. But yeah, I'm not really interested in any of those. And then we have Alexis Henderson. I definitely want to read House of Hunger soon. I did read The Year of the Witching from Alexis Henderson and thought it was okay. And Alexis Henderson is recommending The Return by Rachel Harrison, who also wrote Cackle, which I haven't read, but I just can't get a read of what type of writer Rachel Harrison is based off of what I've heard about different books of theirs. So this was their debut novel about a group of friends who reunite after one of them has returned from a mysterious 2-day disappearance. 2 days to the year they went missing. This is a very vague description, but its average rating is just really low, so that's kind of why I've never picked it up. And then The Hacienda, which we talked about before, Tender as the Flesh, which I read and enjoyed, and then Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, which I also read and enjoyed, and I don't know why it's not marked as a 5-star, because that is a 5-star read. And then we have Paul Tremblay. The Pallbearers Club is his latest book, which I really enjoyed. And he is recommending Come Closer by Sarah Gran, which I think is mentioned in A Head Full of Ghosts, which is also a possession type story, which is what Come Closer is. So that definitely is still on my radar. And then the other 3 books are from Mariana Enriquez, Stephen Graham Jones, and John Langan, who are all authors that I've read from before. And each of these books I have never heard of from them, so that is very interesting. And then we have the author of The Hacienda, who I haven't read from before. And all of these recommendations I believe are also anthologies. This I know is an anthology. This I know is an anthology. This is also an anthology. And then this also appears to be an anthology. So I'm not going to be adding any of those to my want to read right now because I've just learned I'm not doing a great job at reading anthologies recently. Then we've got Ainsley Hogarth, who is the author of Mother Thing, which I have not read yet, but I definitely want to. Recommending The Ruins by Scott Smith, a book I've heard a lot about, but never really been interested in. The Grip of It, which we just added to the TBR a minute ago. The Good House by Tanana Reevdu. I am getting ready to read The Between by Tanana Reevdu, and so I think after reading that, I will have a better sense of what I would want to read next from them. So going to hold on putting that on my TBR. And then the other book is from Year 11, so this must be super old. Yeah, it's from the 50s. This is just such an interesting combination of books to put together from what I know about these books. And I'm very curious what Mother Thing is going to be like after seeing that. Okay, so that is the end of that one. next up we have scary reading recommendations based on classic horror novels. Ooh, okay, so I like this one. I don't think I've ever seen Goodreads do an article like this, but this is really cool. It is a, if you like this, read this style, and then pulls out common themes in the writing as well. So if you liked Dracula by Bram Stoker, which I did, you can see it was a 4-star read for me, then you might be into reading about damp castles, staying up late, very pale ladies with sharp teeth, fatal love bites, and dudes who turn into bats. Do enjoy those things. And here are some vampire recommendations. So Let the Right One In, that is a book that became a movie. I've seen the movie, really enjoyed it, so I do want to read the book because it's been a couple of years since I watched the movie and I want to read the book and watch the movie again. Interview with the Vampire, I have also seen that movie. I've never really been interested in the book. This Dracula book is coming up again, so let's look into that one. And then Octavia E. Butler's Fledgling. I definitely want to read Kindred from Octavia E. Butler first, so I'm not going to add that one right now. Okay, so this is a prequel to Dracula, inspired by notes and texts left behind by the author of the classic novel. Dracula is a supernatural thriller that reveals not only Dracula's true origins, but Bram Stoker's and the tale of the enigmatic woman who connects them. And I don't think I'm particularly interested in it. I like retellings that do something different, like bring it into the modern day or switch the gender, or I don't know, just do something very different. But I'm not super interested in reading a prequel of Dracula, so I don't think I'm gonna add any of those on my list. Oh, and there are more. I didn't think there would be more. I thought there was only gonna be 4. But these I have read more of. I did read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, did not love that one. Did read Woman Eating by Claire Coda, thought it was okay. House of Hunger, definitely on my TBR. And then Reluctant Immortals is another one I keep seeing around, so I might add that one to my TBR as well. This one came out this year. It says for fans of Mexican Gothic, from 3-time Bram Stoker award-winning author Gwendolyn Kist, a novel inspired by the untold stories of forgotten women in classic literature, as they band together to combat the toxic men bent on destroying their lives, set against the backdrop of the Summer of Love, Haight-Ashbury, 1967. See, this is what I mean about a retelling. I like when you do something different with it, like bring it into a different time, or bring women from different stories who didn't get the spotlight and pull them all together. I am gonna add that to my TBR. Okay, next up we have if you liked House of Leaves, which I did like House of Leaves, then you might be into reading about metafictional takes on familiar tropes, paying lots of attention to marginalia, books within books, non-linear narratives, genre and mind-bendy books, all things which I enjoy. And the recommendations, we've got You Should Have Left, which I did not like, a couple of books I've never heard of, Devil House by John Darnielle, which I'm hearing really bad reviews on, so I haven't really picked it up. And I also want to read The Universal Harvester from John Darnielle first before picking that one up. Chasing the Boogeyman, which is metafiction, so I see how that one got pulled on here. Runtime, which I really enjoyed. The Pallbearers Club, which I really enjoyed. Both of those make sense because Runtime is like a story within a story within a story, and the Pallbearers Club is a story that has annotations around it too, so it's kind of similar to House of Leaves in that way. And then A History of Fear, I've never heard of that, so I'm gonna check out these other books probably just on my own time so this video doesn't get super long, but I'm gonna look into if I want to read any of those. And then we've got if you liked The Haunting of Hill House, which I thought was okay. This one I didn't really love the story, so I'm not going to read too much into these recommendations, but just looking at all of them, I have read a few. I did like Nothing But Blackened Teeth, which is an unpopular opinion, and I did like Just Like Home, and I did like When the Reckoning Comes. This one I feel like should be a 4-star. Sometimes my ratings on Goodreads just change over time. And then Malice House, I have been looking at this one because I saw it on my Libby app that my library got it, so I'm kind of interested in listening to the audiobook of that one if I have time. And then just the cover of Old Country looks really interesting too. Oh yeah, and I did recently just hear about this one because as I was doing a recent video where I read horror books that originally started on the No Sleep Reddit, I came across this one too. And so if I ever do a part 2 of that series, I think I would fit this one in there as well. That's very interesting to see that recommended under The Haunting of Hill House. Rosemary's Baby I have not read, but it says you might be into reading about pregnancy as body horror, overly honest writing about the terrors of parenting, which I am very interested in reading about, devilishly strange children, religious weirdness, also interested in reading about that, and Moms on the Verge of Madness. Okay, I like all these things. I definitely want to read Just Like Mother and Night Bitch. Those are both high on my radar. The others, I feel like I've just heard either not about them at all or bad reviews, like Baby Teeth and The Need. I hear bad reviews for those a lot, and the others I haven't heard of, but they do have intriguing covers, so I might check those out later. Then we've got Rebecca, which I DNF'd halfway through, didn't really enjoy it, but that is a gothic story about creepy husbands, ex-wives who just won't go away, physical and psychological isolation, marriages where till death do us part becomes a threat. And I do think Mexican Gothic is a great recommendation for that. Comfort Me with Apples is a great recommendation for that too. Both of those were good/great. And then Silent Companions, again, still keeps coming up. Definitely gonna have to look into that one more. And The Lost Ones I've never heard of. It was published a couple of years ago. It has a pretty high average rating and it has a really cool cover. So I'll definitely look into that one too. Then we have, if you liked Carrie, you should read Mary, which I did and I thought was good. The Weight of Blood, which was very good. My Dearest Darkest, which was also very good. And Such a Pretty Smile, I have not read, but if I've liked all the other books in this grouping, I should probably add that one to my TBR as well. Next we have this H.P. Lovecraft story collection, which I've never read from H.P. Lovecraft. And I am interested in Our Wives Under the Sea, but I think I'm just gonna start there and see if I wanna get into all that weirdness before taking other recommendations. Harvest Home, this is a book I've never heard of, but apparently it's a folk horror with Midsommar-esque vibes. Werewolves and Wicker Men, really messed up harvests, rural nightmares, and urban legends coming to life. Definitely do wanna read Loot, that one's been on my TBR. And then otherwise, this grouping of books is very interesting to see all together. I don't really know what to decipher of all of this. I never rated Stolen Tongues on here. That was a 2-star. And The Honeys I just added to my TBR. But this is a very interesting group of books. A lot of culty things going on, isolation, strange monsters. Interesting. Next we've got The Exorcist, which I haven't read, but I have obviously seen the movie. A couple books here that I definitely want to read. I'm getting more into understanding possession horror and if I'm interested in it. And that brings us to the end of this article. Next up, we've got new Gothic tales from the past 4 years. Really like Gothic stories, so I think this will be a good list. So first is 2020 books, and I DNF'd this one. Not as interested in this one. This one's on my TBR. Juniper and Thorn is interesting to see on this list. I thought that was more of a fantasy book, but I guess it could have Gothic energy to it. Direwood, also on my TBR. Children on the Hill, I have lost interest in that one, to be honest. I always get interested in Jennifer McMahon's books, and then they just fall off my radar. Help Me, I recently added after someone recommended that personally to me, so definitely want to read that one. Hidden Pictures I recently purchased. Our Wives Under the Sea, really want to read that. Leech I would like to read. House of Hunger. Ghost Eaters I just read. Cherry Robbers I did not know was a Gothic story. I just thought that was like literary fiction. That's interesting. Reluctant Immortals again. Tripping Arcadia. The Witch in the Well. A lot of books I have not heard of on this one, so this could be a good place for me to find some recommendations. Comfort Me with Apples. Lighthouse Witches. So many books I have never heard of. Oh, there's this Wakenhurst again. I have heard of like none of those. So from the 2019 grouping, I have heard of none of these books before today. So that's really interesting. 2020, I've only heard of 2 of them. Oh, I've heard of The Nesting. I just didn't recognize this cover. Interesting. There's so many books on here that I've never heard of. CJ Cook's popping up a lot. I didn't realize that they had that many books. They have The Lighthouse Witches, The Nesting, The Ghost Woods, which has a really cool cover, so I might have to check out something from them in the future. I feel like I have a lot of Gothic books on my TBR, but not a lot of these I've actually read before, so that's very interesting. Maybe I'll do a vlog reading Gothic books and see what I think of them. That could be fun. And next up we have Terror Knows No Boundaries with these translated horror novels. So all of these are books that were originally written in a different language and have been translated to English. And I've heard of none of these so far except for Tender is the Flesh. So I think this will be another good one to get a lot of new recommendations. Obviously I've heard of Junji Ito. The House Guest, that one keeps coming up. Let the Right One In. Books I definitely want to read. I did not realize Echo was a translated fiction. I've heard of that book and seen it around a lot. Didn't know that. The Dangers of Smoking Bed. This is the book by Mariana Enriquez that I did start before and ended up DNFing. It's a story collection, so I just don't have the best of luck with those. Fever Dream, The Hole, which I've read and enjoyed. So I think I've only read 2 books on this list, and then I had 1 DNF. So that's super cool. A lot of new recommendations here. The Decapitated Chicken sounds very interesting, but it is a short story collection, so I don't know if it'll be the best thing for me to pick up, but I am very intrigued by a lot of these covers and titles. So this will be really fun to look for some recommendations here. And again, this could be another reading vlog idea of reading translated horror books. So you see how the ideas just start flowing? That's why I love Goodreads lists. And we have 2 lists left. We have the most popular horror books from the first half of 2022 and meet this season's dark and twisty hit books. So I'm gonna start with this one because I wanna end with the most popular books of this year. So let's check out this one first. So these are summer horror books from June, July into mid-August. And already I feel like I'm gonna have read a lot of these. Let's see, all the top 3 I've read. What Moves the Dead was DNF, but I did read it. And I did like the Pallbearers Club, just like home. Aurora was on my radar for a bit, but ended up falling off. Nightcrawling 2, that one was a Booker Prize long list. I don't know if it made it to the short list, but the cover of this one is just really cool. But I'm very curious if it is actually horror or what the genre is for that one, because I thought it was more literary. Some thrillers in here. Wake the Bones, I do want to read that one. Add that one to my TBR. Dirt Creek, never heard of that, but does not look particularly interesting. Ordinary Monsters is surprising to see on this list because that's a fantasy book. Interesting. We Were Never Here. I feel like that book came out years ago. I did not think that came out. Oh yeah, no, published in 2021. Interesting. How did that one make it on this list? That must have been an accident. Stay Awake, which is fine. The Family Remains, which I still haven't gotten to, and then some more books that I haven't heard of. This is just like not the best list. This is probably the worst list from what we've seen. I don't feel like it makes a lot of sense. I don't feel like they fit in the genres very well. And there's a book here that was not even published this year. So if we were ranking these lists, this one would be on the bottom. And then lastly, looking at the most popular horror books from the first half of 2022. Mainly I'm just interested in seeing how many of these I've read to see how up to date I am. So I'm gonna see how many there are in the list total so I can count. So we have 30 books total, and let's count how many of these I have read. We've got 0 so far. Still 0. Okay, we've got 2. I read Hide and Sundial, so still just 2. Okay, 3, 4. This was a DNF. 5, 6, 7. So I've read 7 out of 30 of the most popular horror books at the beginning of this year, which is not great, but a lot of these are already on my TBR. Let me see if there's any more I want to add. I feel like I should just go ahead and add the Hacienda to my TBR because it's in all of these lists. This is clearly going to be in the Goodreads top horror books of the year. I just feel like that solidified its position there. I'm just gonna have to read it. It is on all of these lists. I'm just gonna have to read it. The Resting Place, I'm not super interested in because I didn't love The Lost Village from Camilla Sten. I didn't hate it like a lot of people did. A lot of people felt really negatively towards that book. I thought it was just fine, but I'm just not particularly interested in The Resting Place. At least right now I'm not. Nettle and Bone, that's super weird to see on here because I thought that was more fantasy. So I feel like that's a weird one to see. In position number 4 also, that's really high. I've got Devil House and Dead Silence. I'm definitely gonna have to read Dead Silence at some point. Sundial, good to see here. The Violence, I was never really too interested in reading. The Cherry Robbers coming up again. I'm gonna have to look into that one. Road of Bones, I was initially interested in that one, but I lost interest. Just Like Mother, I really want to read. Cherish Farah, Such a Pretty Smile, which we added from an earlier list. My Dearest Darkest, I'm so glad to see that one on this list because I'm pretty sure this was this author's debut and they're not a super well-known author, I don't believe, so that's really exciting to see that book getting a lot of love because it was really fun and definitely deserves it for a good YA horror book. Then we've got The Fervor, Amakatsu, Manhunt, that was a DNF for me. Beneath the Stairs, never really was interested in that one. Woman Eating is weird to see on here because it's just like literary with like a little tiny little whisper of horror. Extasia, never read that one. Hidden Pictures, which I didn't think would be bucketed as horror. I haven't read it yet, but just didn't think that it would. Hell Followed With Us is one that I definitely want to read. That one came on my radar recently. The Stephen King book, of course, Sarah Grant's book, Primal Animals. weird. I feel like they need separate lists for YA horror and adult horror for these to make it make sense, because they're just mixed in, and if you don't know, this is kind of strange. Dark Reckoning, never heard of that one. Heinous Murder sends Florida tabloid reporters looking for details. Supernatural Force. Oh, only 39. Now, how is a book that only has 39 ratings making it to number 26 in the most popular horror books of the first half of this year? That is perplexing. It has 39 ratings and 13 reviews. Make that make sense. This also looks like it's indie published because it was published by Jacob Moon Publishing and the author is Jacob Moon. That feels like a paid placement to me. Yeah, because even the next book down has almost 1,000 ratings, so that doesn't make any sense. And then A Black and Endless Sky, I don't think I've heard of that one. Also doesn't have a lot of reviews, only 445 ratings. And then Black Tide, which I don't really know anything about, and it doesn't have the best average rating, so I'm not super intrigued by that one yet. This feels like it's missing things. This list just feels off. It feels wrong. It feels weird. The genres feel strange. I feel like this is probably the second worst list from what we viewed. So glad we saved these for the end because they were not as great or as helpful of lists. And that's kind of the thing with Goodreads lists, is sometimes they're great and you find a lot of books that you want to add to your TBR, and sometimes they're questionable. But that was it for all of the horror book lists on Goodreads for the spooky season. Hopefully you had fun just browsing along with me, seeing what I've read, seeing what I think about the lists. I do this all the time. So if you're interested in this and if you had a good time with this, I could definitely do more videos like this in the future. They usually do it around different seasonal periods where they will package lists to be around a certain theme. Like around Valentine's Day, they do a lot of romance related lists and other things. So if there's any other time when you would like to see my reactions to Goodreads lists, definitely let me know. The next time you'll hear me talking about Goodreads will be when I'm reacting to the Goodreads Choice Awards, what actually is coming out for that, because I did make a predictions video, and so I'm going to be vlogging my experience as the nominees are coming out for the top 20, top 10, and whichever one wins to see if I was correct on my predictions or not. So if you missed that video, make sure you go check that one out soon before those are announced, because then I'll have a video following up so you can make sure you're all caught up for that. But yeah, that was kind of it for this video. More chill one today, just hanging out, scrolling through some lists together, but that's what I love to do. Love a good list, so hopefully you do too. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!